Okay, good to see everybody on this Monday. I've been traveling a bit. Thanks for glad to be back in the classes. What is going on? First of all, this week's classes are dedicated to Dinah bas Devorah, whose yahrzeit is Hey Tammuz, when she passed away. Hey Vav Tammuz, tragically, and we'd like to her neshama should have an aliyah, which means it should ascend on high as it right. The neshama continues on, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that because that fits very well with the roundup over here. This week's parsha is called Chaya Sarah, the life of Sarah, even though it really only talks about what happened after she passed away. And so we're going to talk about the significance of that, and it fits well with the Tanya of the week. The Tanya of this week is from the Alter. Is a letter from the Alter Rebbe to the Rebbe Levi Yitzhak of Berditchev, the Berditchev Rav, very famous. He was known for his ability to find merits in even in those who didn't deserve any merit. Yeah, he was able to find merit in them. And his son tragically passed away. I'm not exactly sure why. I think he might have passed away from a disease. And he passed away, and he wrote him a letter. And the Alter Rebbe discusses the famous question in the Gemara. The Gemara says, why is the portion that discusses the para aduma, the red heifer, which we've spoken about in the past, which talks about purifying those who became impure, spiritually impure, from touching a dead body. Why is that parsha, that portion, right next to the portion which speaks about Miriam's passing, the passing of Miriam, the sister of Aaron and of Moses? And the Gemara answers, just like the waters of the sprinkling of the red heifer's ashes, the red cow's ashes, the sprinkling of them on a person purifies them. Same thing, the passing of a tzaddik, of a righteous person, brings purification and atonement for everyone in the world. And he explains something interesting, that the life of a person is much more impactful. The impact of a person is much more impactful after the soul leaves the body. Because while the soul is in the body, it's constrained. It's like energy in a refrigerator. Yeah, while it's in the refrigerator, it's boxed up. Now it can be utilized for good, and everything in this, it could utilize. It can get a refrigerator going. It can give us a lot of benefit. And what happens when the refrigerator goes out? The energy doesn't just stop, it dissipates. It doesn't dissipate, it goes back everywhere. Energy is all around us. We're able to harness that energy and put it in a box for a period of time until that box can no longer operate. But when the box is not operating anymore, the energy goes back everywhere. Electricity is all around us. So the same thing with the soul. The soul is all around us, just like God is all around us. It's an extension of godliness. And what happens is we're able to box it up for 70, 80, hopefully 120 years. But after that, the soul leaves the body, and now it goes back everywhere. But it's still able to have its impact on the world. And even more so, because it's not constrained in the body, it's everywhere now. The only so why we should seemingly celebrate when a soul leaves the body, but we don't. Why don't we celebrate? Why is there a certain sadness? Because we can't see it anymore. Because our souls are within bodies, we can only see through our fleshly eyes. And therefore we can only see other flesh. We can only see other material, physical things, because we live in the world of Asiya, in a physical world. And while we live in a physical world, we can only see things through physical eyes. So that's why there's sadness. But nevertheless, it doesn't take away the truth. The truth is that the soul lives on, and it says it lives on even more powerfully, and it has more of an effect than it did while it was in the body. And the soul goes through ascents every day. Why do we say the Kaddish prayer when somebody passes away? There's something called the Kaddish that we've spoken about many times in the Siddur class. What is the Kaddish prayer? A Kaddish, as we've spoken about, is a pillar. As a pillar in a spiritual world, it's a pillar, and it's like it elevates, the soul elevates through that pillar. Those words carry the soul up even higher. So we say it 5 times a day, 5 times in each prayer, corresponding to the 5 levels. We say it 3 times a day. So in that first year, when the soul leaves the body, it ascends multiple times a day. It needs your help to ascend. Well, those that are connected to the body, those that are connected to the soul, I mean. And then every subsequent year, on the anniversary, on the yard side, you say the Kaddish again, and it gives it another push. And that push continues on forever. There's always an ascent happening with the soul, because godliness, God is infinite, or he's not finite, is more to put it more accurately. And so therefore it continues to ascend at all times. And that's why we wish the souls of those who pass on, we wish them on an ascent. They should continue to have an ascent, come closer and closer to godliness, to the essence of God, and the essence is infinitude. But we always end off by saying we don't want just the soul to ascend on and on, but we want the souls, as the promise is, we see many times in the Torah, the promise that God has given to the Jewish people, that the souls will return to the bodies when Mashiach comes, and it should happen speedily. So that is this week's part. That is this week's Tanya, and it fits quite well with Parshas Chaya Sarah. Chaya Sarah literally means the life of Sarah. But Sarah passes away right in the beginning. Why does she pass away? Says Rashi. She found out her son was offered up as a korban, as a sacrifice. Now, she found out that he wasn't killed, but the mere mention, or the mere when she said that he was at least brought up, her soul pircha nishmasa. It says her soul left her body. The question is, did she pass away a little bit early? Yeah, some tragic event. Did she pass away early? And it's left up for a machloikis. It's left up for a disagreement. We don't know if she passed away, if she passed away early or not. Some say she did, some say she didn't. But somehow it's not pertinent to know whether she passed away early or not. But why is it called the life of Sarah? Many explanations. Because a person's life is about their impact on the world. A soul in a body that does nothing and just sits around, making no impact on the world, is not a life. They just haven't died yet, so to speak. But if a person has an impact, whatever impact they have in the world, that is life. That is giving something. So therefore, there's life. Now, we won't get into so much detail about that, but the fact that Yitzhak got married, everything that took place after she passed away, was like her whole life's mission came into fruition. What did she want? She wanted a child who would then be able to continue the mission that she started, which is bringing about monotheism and getting married and having children, and building a nation, building a Jewish nation, but not just a Jewish nation, impacting the entire world. And that was her entire life. That was her entire dedication, and that continued on even more so. It was done. It continued on at a rapid pace. It was an exponential growth. So therefore, her life continued. It's called Chaya Sarah. The Torah is trying to teach us that life is not just about having a soul in the body, but life is having an impact on the world. You don't need to be the best communicator. You don't have to. Torah says you don't even need to be. You can be in jail. You can be almost incapacitated and still have an effect upon the world by really all the actions you're able to do right now. Well, if you can take advantage of today, people will remember you for whatever you've done for them, and that will continue on. That will continue on. So therefore, your impact continues on. That was her life. So the question is, why didn't Avram tell Sarah that he was going to raise why didn't Avram tell Sarah that he was going to bring Yitzhak up as a sacrifice? Avram knew that if God wanted Sarah to know, he would have told her, because and it's unclear exactly why God didn't want to tell Sarah. Perhaps she would be able to convince God otherwise. We know that Sarah had a greater level of prophecy. She was able to prophesy better than Avram was. From the story of Sarah, once Yitzhak was born, she wanted Yishmael and Hagar to leave, to get out. It was a bad influence on Yitzhak. And Avram, who's the epitome of kindness, said, I can't do that. And she said, you have to do it, and you will do it. And God Avram went to God and asked him, and God said, yes, you have to listen to her. She has a greater level of prophecy than you. She's able to do the right thing. So the fact that God didn't tell Sarah, God knew, Avram understood that it was not Sarah, whatever reason Sarah didn't know. We know that a tzaddik or a tzaddikis are able to change God's mind. And perhaps this was part of God's plan. Obviously, it was part of God's plan, the binding of Isaac. So he didn't want to tell Sarah because any mother would convince God otherwise. If you're going to sacrifice my son, I will convince you not to do such a thing. And clearly, God did not want that to happen. It says after the Torah gets into after the binding of Isaac, and he survives, and he doesn't survive. It doesn't offer him up. It says that Avram went back to Beersheba. What do you mean went back to Beersheba? It wasn't Avram from Beersheba. So the Torah tells us that he actually lived in Hebron, Kiryat Arba. Hebron is where the burial of our patriarchs are, except for Rachel. That's the answer to today's quiz, by the way, if you want to know. Kiryat Arba. Kiryat Arba means 4, where the 4 people are buried. The 4 mothers. Well, not the 4 mothers. It was really for the 4 kings, but the 4. What does Rashi say? I'll look it up in a second. Yeah, he lived in Hebron. We're going to purchase the plot of land today. But why did he go back to Beersheba? Because he had something called an Eshel. The Eshel was his tent that was open up on all sides, where passerbyers would go by, and he would offer them food and teach them about monotheism, like we spoke about last week. And that was his pride and joy. He loved it. So he would actually travel back and forth from Hebron to Beersheba to check up on his business. It wasn't a very profitable business. In fact, I think it only lost a tremendous amount of money every year. But nevertheless, that was his life, this Eshel. It's unclear whether it was a tent or if it was actually a tree. It was a huge tree that gave tremendous shade. But it seems like most people agree that it was a Eshel. It really means a tree, but it seems that it was really a tent. In fact, there is the word Eshel you'll see all over, especially like frum cities. Cities where there's a lot of more traditional Orthodox Jews. And what are they? They're hotels. They're hotels, usually at a discount, and they offer food and shelter. So if you ever see Eshel, you'll know what it is. We see that he eulogized her for a period of time. Interestingly enough, if you go to a cemetery, if you go to a chas v'shalom, God forbid, we shouldn't have to know such things. But if you ever go to you have to go to a cemetery. Somebody has to get buried. Somebody passed away. A funeral. You'll see a lot of circles that don't eulogize. We don't eulogize, especially Hasidim and Chabad Hasidim in particular. There's almost no eulogy, and the reason is there's a medrash in Koheles that says. When they're judging the soul, whether it should go to how many months of Gehenna it should go, purification, should it go straight to Shemayim, whatever these things mean. It's not like whatever you think about in movies and in your head and TV shows, throw that out. That's not there's no pain. It's not there's no body there. It's whatever. It's a soul spiritual thing. We don't really know what that means. Anyway, when it gives this judgment, they say before they pass on judgment, God says to his angels, his messengers, let's go down to see what they're eulogizing. How do they eulogize the person? What kind of person it was? Before we give our judgment, let's see what they're saying about him or her. And hopefully they say good things. And if they say good things, that helps their case. However, what happens is at a eulogy, there's excessiveness. They excessively say good things to an excess about this person, which are untrue. What happens is when the angels and when Hashem sees that people are judging them or eulogizing them to great excess, and it's basically you've gone beyond the truth, it's very harmful for the soul. The opposite happens. And to try to stay away from that, to try to avoid that excess, basically lying to a certain extent. Someone will say he never only ever did good for somebody else. It's not true. We're not perfect. We don't only, our whole life wasn't dedicated to only doing good at every moment. Yeah, we're selfish people. Maybe not you, but for sure me. We're selfish at sometimes. Yeah, we have an ego, we have an animal soul. So in order not to cause harm, we don't really eulogize. What do? We bury right away as quickly as we possibly can. In Israel, they do it within 24 hours. If you can do it in America, you should. It's a little bit more difficult because people have to travel. In Israel, everybody lives within an hour drive from one another at the very least. So it's more accessible. It's easier to bury right away. In America, we live all over the place. So usually it's okay. We wait. Sometimes we have to wait a day or two. But they bury and it's quick. And then you go back to Shiva. You go sit in the house. You sit Shiva. And we tell stories. We tell positive stories, true stories of the person who passed and what kind of impact it had on ourselves. That's the way we eulogize. The word I was looking for is exaggerate. People tend to exaggerate the person's qualities, and that causes great harm. Okay, so Avram goes to Ephron, the king, and he says, I'd like to buy a plot I'd like to buy some land. Because Avram knows that there's a cave over here. And who's buried in that cave? Tradition tells him, that Adam and Eve, Adam and Chava, are buried in this cave. And he says, I'd like to buy this plot of land. I'd like to bury my wife here. Now, Ephron everybody knows who Avram is. Avram is very famous, very wealthy, very influential. He says, no, take it for free. I know God is with you. Take it for free. And we don't like to do things in gratis. We don't, Jews, you should pay for things. It'll come back to bite you if you don't. It becomes a problem. So we try to pay. So Avram insists on paying, and it's a whole back and forth, and Ephron says, fine. Now, the plot of land was really probably worth, let's say, $100. And Ephron said, I'll make you a big deal, $4,000. Something beyond what it was really worth. And we see that Avram didn't bargain. He didn't try to knock him down. He said, fine, that's what I'll pay. And he records it. And the Torah records it because the Torah says there's going to come a time where people are going to say, the land doesn't belong to the Jews. But we'll say, what do you mean? We purchased this land. We bought it, and we have a document showing who we bought it from, how much we paid for it, when it took place. And we see Hebron is quite disputed till this day. I mean, we can't even go to Maras Machpelah. We can't even visit Yitzhak whenever we want to. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever been there to the cave of Machpelah. You can't just go see Yitzhak whenever you want, despite all the reasons why it belongs to us, clearly, obviously. So the prophecy kind of came true. Anyway, so he buys the land. And he buries her there, and he sits Shiva, and that's what happens. What happens after that? Avram then goes back to God tells Avram, it's time for your son Yitzhak to get married. And he sends. God says, and I'm going to tell you who she is. Her name is Rivka, and she was just born, and she's in Haran. He had a prophecy. And what happens? Avram sends his servant Eliezer and says, go to Haran and go and find someone suitable for my daughter. He didn't say, go to this family, and there's a girl named Rivka. He says, go there and try to find someone suitable. So the Talmud tells us a few different reasons why. First of all, the question is, why didn't Avram just find somebody from his own? The obvious question is, the Gemara asks a whole bunch of questions. He could have just found somebody in his own group. He made a lot of Bali Tshuva. Yeah, he brought a lot of people to monotheism. He had 3 very close friends, Honor, Eshkol, and Mamre. Yeah, that we spoke about last week. These were top-notch people. I'm sure they had some great children. And Eliezer himself was super holy. How do we know he was holy? There were only a handful of times, if not 2, maybe only 2 times, where a person was sent up to Shemaim. They passed away with their bodies. Their bodies were brought up to heaven because the body itself was so holy, it was able to ascend up to Shemaim together with the soul. Eliyahu Hanavi and Eliezer. I just want to point something out really quickly. Something I said before. Avram didn't bargain. Why didn't Avram bargain? So the Arizal says he didn't bargain for the plot of land. The Arizal says he merited prophecy. He said about himself. He goes, I experienced prophecy for 3 reasons. Number 1, I have joy. As we've spoken many times, joy is not just a good idea, but it allows you to be fluid. You're an open vessel. Number 2, I bought my wife whatever she wanted. When she wanted something, I would get it for her. That's what he said. And number 3, I never bargained for a mitzvah. And we learned that out from Avram. He didn't bargain for a mitzvah. So those 3 things, because of those 3 things, I merited to have prophecy. Just wanted to mention that. So Eliezer was very holy. And Eliezer actually thought, Eliezer had a daughter, marriageable age, and wanted her to marry to Yitzhak. And Avram sensed that. And Avram said to Eliezer, go, I want you to go look for a suitable match. And there's two reasons why Avram said that to Eliezer. Avram wanted to show that Rivka was on a different level than his daughter. And it was a logical, you can see for your own eyes that this girl is not just any other girl. Different game we're playing. And it even says in the Medrash that Eliezer never openly said, I want Yitzhak to marry my daughter. But Avram sensed that. And Avram at one point told him very straight, you have a blemish in your spiritual makeup. Now, this is Eliezer, a person who went up with his body to Shemaim. He said there's a blemish in your spiritual makeup. While where I come from, my lineage, we have no blemish in our spiritual makeup, and he can't marry into your family. Very direct, says the Medrash. And the Medrash says the reason why Avram did this, which is completely against his nature, the person who was extremely kind and warm, because sometimes you can't beat around the bush. You can't be vague with when dealing with another person's emotions. You got to tell them direct. It might hurt for a moment, but you got to cut it off because you got to move forward. Being vague and being around the bush drags things on, and progress isn't made. And the Jewish people need to be progressive. There always needs to be progress. We always need to be movement and growth. We're called mahalchim, movers, unlike angels, which are called amudim, people who stand, the ones who stand still. A human and a Jew in particular are called mahalchim. You got to constantly be moving and progressing. Sometimes you just have to say it the way it is. So Eliezer says, fine, I'm going to go to Haran, and I'm going to, this is how I'm going to find out if who's the right girl. I have 10 camels with me. If the first woman who comes to me and offers food and drink, not only for myself, but for my camels, I'll know that she's the one. And right away, the Torah goes, he sees this girl, and she offers water for him, a place to sleep for him, food for him, and water for the camels. Now, camels, I don't exactly know how much water they drink, but it's like 10 gallons of water. The first, when they drink about 10 gallons, and they store it in their little humps back there. 10 gallons. Now, I don't know if she was rich. It doesn't seem like she was very wealthy, but she was extremely generous. And he had 10 camels. That's 100 gallons of water from a well. That's crazy, crazy expensive in a desert. No joke. And he says, oh, this is the one, very clearly. And he gives shvach and he gives praises, and he thanks Hashem right away for the open miracle that he experienced. Why was this? What is the Torah teaching us? That she offered him water, and goes into like great detail that repeats the story twice actually in the Torah. And the Torah is not Charles Dickens. It doesn't get paid by the word over here. Yeah, the Torah is usually very, very short, very concise, very concise. But it retells the story twice. One of the reasons is to tell you what you're supposed to look for in a shidduch, in a mate. And what is that? I'll tell you, as the Rebbe said it. The Rebbe said it like this: the Rebbe said you should marry someone that is smart, attractive, beautiful, and nice. Right? So the Rebbe says, when I say someone's smart, they don't have to be so smart. They don't have to be so smart. When I say beautiful, they don't have to be so beautiful. But when I say nice, they have to be nice. The quality of a spouse is that they're nice. They give. They give to another person. That is what a relationship is all about. And we learn that from this week's parsha. The Torah this is the first time we ever talked about a shidduch, matchmaking. And the shadchan is Eliezer. And we see that he looks for the quality of a person being nice and giving. And that's the main quality of a spouse. Okay. Just moving along in the parsha over here. So he brings her back. She says that Rivka is like a rose among the thorns. Why? She grew up in a very bad household. Spiritually, they were giants. But their bodies, physically, they were terrible people. Yeah, it was very covered over. But she was able to stay in touch with it. She was able to shine through. And in fact, God told Avram to go right now, because if she stays any longer, things are about to go hairy. Yeah, she's about to get sucked in she's about to get pricked by the thorns, and her petals will fall off. So that's why he was sent right away. And he brings her back. He marries her, and what happens? He brings her in. It says that Avram brought her as Rivka was coming, and it says that he raised his eyes towards evening and saw her coming. And what was the Torah tells us? What do you mean raise his eyes towards evening? What was he doing towards the evening? Not in the evening, but towards the evening. He was davening mincha. And from this, the Torah says we established the mincha prayer. That Yitzhak was the one who established the mincha prayer. Now, my quiz today, you'll know the answer. What are the three prayers called? Shachris, Mincha, and Mariv. Shachris means morning. Shachar means as the way the sun shines. Mariv comes from the word arvit, which means evening. But what's the word for afternoon? Tzaharayim. But the Torah doesn't call it Tzaharayim. We don't call it in halacha. Traditionally, we don't call it Tzaharayim. Nobody calls it Tzaharayim. Ashkenazi, Sfard, whatever you want to be. We call it mincha. Mincha means a gift. Why? Because God says like this. It says that Eliyahu Navi God only answers your prayers during mincha time. Because God says if you can take a moment in your day, the busiest part of your day, and dedicate it to me, that's a gift. That shows true connection, a true relationship. So he was davening mincha. And a person should be very careful about mincha, says the Torah. The mincha is actually a very holy time. It's called Raivin Deraivin, the holiest time of the day. When Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, had the showdown with the Baal. Yeah, the only time we ever gave a sacrifice. There's a rule: you can't make any sacrifices outside of the holy temple. Once the holy temple was built, God says no sacrifices can be given outside of the holy temple. One time it happened. Elijah the prophet, which is a whole story in and of itself. How could he possibly do that? How did he know to do that? Which we won't get into right now. He brought it at mincha time, specifically mincha time, because he knows that mincha is a time of eis rotzing. It's a very desired time by God. And mincha time, we should be very careful. So, and it says that he brought her, it says Yitzhak saw her, he brought her into his tent, and he loved her. Really, it should say, the Talmud says, it should really say that he saw her, he loved her, and then he brought her into his tent to get married. But no, it says the opposite. He brought her into his tent, and then he loved her. The Torah is teaching us that love at first sight is not true. That love only happens after the marriage takes place. That that's when you really see the person. That through the person raising a family, going through hardships, sacrifices, the Torah says, sacrifices. They go through sacrifices, you begin to appreciate the person, then you begin to really love the person. Love does not happen right away. Yeah, he brings her into the tent. It says that there was a cloud that hovered over the tent during Sarah's life. It also said that the challah always stayed fresh, and the candles would burn for the entire week. You can get week-long candles, by the way. They would burn the entire week. It was a miracle. There were these miracles that happened over Sarah's tent, and when she passed away, they disappeared. And when Rivka then came back into the tent, all those miracles returned. It says that it says about a husband, God forbid his wife passes away, he says when his mother passes away, when his mother passes away, he finds comfort in his wife. That his wife, he becomes more comforted on a very simple level. He becomes much closer to his wife. What happens afterwards? Avram gets remarried, but he marries a woman named Keturah. Who was Keturah? Rashi says Hagar, the one he divorced. Why was he called? Why was her name now Keturah? Because she would burn Ketoris, which we spoke about last week's parsha. She would burn incense to avodah zarah, to idol worship, and so she had that name. But why did she do that? Says Rashi. Why did she burn incense? She grew up with Avraham. She seemingly went back to her old ways as a pagan, offering incense to other gods. It says Rashi from the Talmud that she didn't do it because she really believed in serving idols, in paganism. She did it because she was mad at Avram. And Avram knew that. She was trying to get back at Avram. Yeah, someone hurts you, you try to hurt them back. People will hurt other people. But Avram knew that she didn't really believe in offering in paganism and offering incense. She did it really so that he would find out and he would be hurt. When she came back, she remarried, and she gave it all up, and she went back to her. He was willing to remarry because she didn't have that really in her, and she didn't do that anymore. So the lesson being that, someone who's angry at you, really, they're not angry at you. Maybe they feel a little hurt, so they want to hurt you back, or they want to hurt somebody. But you should try to take control of your emotions and give people the benefit of the doubt. And Yishmael, it says about Yishmael that he did Teshuva. He came back to his senses, became a nice person, and he's actually buried right outside Maras HaMachpelah, which it's not going to talk about his death now, but it will next parsha. He came back and he did Teshuva. Now that ability to be a para adam, that quality that he was a wild man, it was passed on to his children before he decided to do Teshuva, before he decided to repent or go back to his regular scheduled programming. Yeah, the person he was really meant to be. So unfortunately, that lived on in the people to come, and it's kind of wreaked havoc upon the Jewish people and upon the rest of the world. But nevertheless, Yishmael himself lived a proper life and merited to be buried in Maras Machpelah. It's called Kirit Arba, by the way, because of the four quality. I just remembered because of the four couples that are buried there: Adam, Chava, Avram, Chava, Avram, Sarah, Yitzhak, Rivka, and Yaakov and Leah. Rachel is buried in Bethlehem, because she's a woman of pure sacrifice and she sacrificed herself. She wanted to stay there. Well, she died on the way, but the deeper reason, like we spoke about before, is because to console the Jewish people that would pass by. Whenever we go into exile, we pass by her grave, and she would beseech God to have compassion upon us, and she was successful. Beautiful stories and beautiful poetry written about that. But Kiryat Arba, Arba means four, for the four, first of all, for the four giants that live there, but on a more Jewish reason, for the four couples that are buried there. What time is it? I think, again, a little bit early. It's a shorter parsha, so there's not much more to speak about. Does anybody have any questions? You guys like my mic? Oh, that's good. Okay, if you have no questions, tonight will be what do we do? Chassidic Nigunim. I have a Nigun story in mind, song in mind. Kick that back off. By the way, I just want to remind everybody that every day at 9 o'clock there is a parsha class, 15 minutes with Rabbi Silverberg. I want to remind you, Sundays there's a 10:15 Tanya class. But every day at 9 o'clock, there's a Chumash class. So if you want to jump on that, 9 o'clock Eastern time, 9 a.m. Eastern time. Tomorrow we'll do halacha, followed by insights into the siddur, more the basics of the siddur and how the siddur is arranged and why it's arranged a certain way. But hopefully I'll see you tonight for Chassidic Nigunim. Enjoy the rest.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. I just remembered.
Don't apologize.
So this thing about Ishmael, like I've always been taught that he wasn't a good guy, but now you're telling me he did Teshuva, and I also read that in the Chabad's weekly Torah portion. So is that like known everywhere, or is that just in Judaism that we know that he did Teshuva?
I can't speak on behalf of everybody else, but for sure it's clearly written in the Torah, the Talmud especially, that he did Teshuva. He's buried right outside of Maras Machpelah. He's buried right outside the structure. Well, there wasn't it was a cave then, but he's buried right outside of where.
Yeah, I've been there. So, wow. So everything changes for me what I think about him now. But thank you. I'm glad.
Him. But his unfortunately his progeny, his descendants didn't do Teshuva. So
no, that's okay. Well, I think that's what's well known. Okay, Thank you. You answered my question.
And I want to mention, if you go into Maras Machpelah and you see, there's like it looks like they're buried much further down, much further down. Through erosion and everything like that. That structure is not that old. That structure maybe is, I don't know, what do they say? Anybody taking a tour over there? Maybe 200 years old, maybe only 100 years old, maybe 300 years old. But the patriarchs and everybody are buried much further down in the cave. We're standing on top of the cave. Now, we believe that's the spot. It's directly above, meaning where we're standing and we're praying to Avram. Not to Avram. We're praying by Abraham's coffin, so to speak. It's way down, straight down. Maybe, I don't even know how many feet. Anybody who's ever taken a tour, I'm sure you can tell me. I never took a tour, but it's much further down. The cave, Maris means Marat is a cave. So there's a cave down there. But we pray way above it. Just like if you go to the Western Wall, you can see, if you ever look, there's two different types of stones going on. There's these gigantic stones, unbelievably huge bricks, stones. That's the original parts of the original wall. But we're basically at the top of the wall, and they built more. They put more stones on top, much newer stones. But really, the Beis Hamikdash was much further down, So through time, obviously, there was an erosion. Okay. No other questions. I'll see you guys tonight. Enjoy the rest of the day. I'm sorry, I'm looking over here because I have my Zoom over here. But I have my Chumash in front of me and my Zoom in front. Okay. All right, everybody, text me whenever you need. Be well.